It's important to know the role of government in Canada, both as an individual, so that you can access all the benefits that you need and protect yourself, and as a business owner, so that your business runs smoothly. 2020 showed how big an effect the government can have. Once COVID 19 hit in 2020, you saw programs like the CERB, which was benefits to replace lost wages. It transitioned into EI in 2021. A rent subsidy, although whether or not this was truly successful remains open for debate. Interest free loans, aid to small businesses, grants to individual targeted groups, and also just programs like Digital Main Street to help small business owners create their first website. Also, you would have seen in Ontario how the government would restrict activities in certain areas to encourage people to work from home, to encourage businesses to be closed except for those selling essential goods, to restrict, in-person dining, things like that. And the Toronto Public Health took the lead in terms of advertising appropriate health and safety precautions, doing contact tracing, and otherwise ensuring that the city of Toronto was protected. So, how does the government impact the average person or the average consumer? Well, the federal government helps us with our social safety net, government social programs to help people who are unable to work because they might have been sick. So there's universal health care throughout Canada administered by the provinces. There's employment insurance. If you are unemployed, you can receive a paycheck while you're looking. For older Canadians, there's the Canadian Pension Plan, so they can have an income after they've retired. There's government programs for various groups, other subsidized services where the government can provide perhaps a loan or a grant to people starting their own businesses. And it's important to be able to know how you can access this. You pay into it with your taxes and with your payroll deductions, so you want to access it when you're in a time of need. So, how do we pay for it? Well, citizens pay for these social services via payroll deduction taxes or when they file their tax at the end of the year. Uh, so, usually it's taken off by the employer. You'll see it on your pay stub. And when you file your taxes, if you've paid more than what was required, you'll receive a refund. If you're self employed, you wait until the end of the year and then you file your taxes and pay for it. So obviously, don't spend that money. And just as a term, your gross pay will be your salary. Then the deductions are taken away, and that leaves your net pay, what you take home. So here we have a imaginary pay stub, and we can see the person's gross pay, for 2 weeks, and they worked a little overtime, so their gross pay here would be $1,725, and then there's some deductions for pension plan, employment insurance, income tax, a company life insurance plan, union dues, and other projects. So you can see that their net pay is actually much smaller than their gross pay, and that goes towards the social safety net. So the Canadian pension plan protects against loss of income. If you're retired or you become disabled or if you die, your partner can get your benefit. And Canadians contribute between the ages of when they turn 18 until 70 or whenever they retire. The employee and employer split half and half. And once you retire and turn 60, you can access it. So if you've retired early, you will have to use your own savings until you get 60 to 60. And so you can get benefits if you become disabled, or your children can get the benefits. There's a retirement pension, and then there's also what was called survival. So if somebody passes away, there's a death penalty, and not death penalty, death benefit that goes to the survivor, and then the children can also, if there's children, they can also receive a benefit. So even if you pass away early, your spouse can still get some of your Canadian pension plan benefits. Employment insurance, it's provide some wages while you're looking for work so you can support yourself. So there's also a pregnancy benefit and an illness benefit, and it even applies to seasonal workers. So if you're working, as a fisher uh, person, I guess, if you're working, as a, ski instructor, you can apply for employment insurance when you're not working. It's not at the same level as actually having the job, but it's better than nothing. So the requirements are, so you want to make sure you're meeting these requirements so that if anything happens, worst case scenario happens, you can receive the benefits. So you have to have lost the job through no fault of your own. So you can't be fired if you're grossly, incompetent and you mess up at work. Unfortunately, this program's not for you. You apply for it, and you have to be actively seeking work. So they might ask you, where have you gone to look for work? What jobs have you applied for? And you might have to provide contact information for places you've gone for interviews. You have to have paid through it in your payroll deductions, and it has to be at least 7 days later. So once you apply for it, 7 days later, you can receive your EI, and you have to have worked 420 to 700 hours. The payments last about 14 to 45 weeks, depending on how much you've worked, and the benefit is about 55% of the weekly earnings you would paid into, to a maximum of 573 a week. And self-employed people do not contribute to EI, so they will not receive benefits. So if you're self-employed, you need to set aside your own rainy day fund. And everyone pays income tax, and there's federal income tax and provincial income tax. And so that goes towards our infrastructure, our education, government agencies, healthcare. One good reason to file your income tax is if too much has been deducted from your paycheck, you'll receive a cash refund as soon as you file your return. Even if you don't have a job, you can file it. There's credits you can get, there's benefits you can get. So it's still it's only illegal not to file your income tax if you owe them money. So if you don't owe them money, you don't have to file. But usually you should, because you're probably going to get a refund or a bit of a benefit of some sort. So and keep your paperwork for 7 years. In case there's a Canada Revenue Agency audit. So here's the marginal tax rates. As you can see, it goes up as the more you make. It starts off, at 15% and goes up to 33% as you make more and more money. So you might also be interested in how the federal government can protect consumers. And the provincial government does this as well. They try to make sure that the buying and selling of goods and services is fair, that advertisement's accurate. So there's Canada's Contribution Bureau ensures that Canadian businesses compete within the rules, and they might do an investigation. For example, I recently visited the website, and there was a hockey helmet manufacturer, and the government had investigated whether the safety claims made in its advertisements were accurate or not. And things like the Competition Act addresses illegal pricing. For example, if two competitors collude to keep their prices artificially high, or fake advertising with inaccurate claims, that's something that the federal government can go look into. And they also produce something called the Little Book of Scams, and it's sort of an advisory about what you can keep an eye out for. For example, phishing scams, or people claiming that you've won the lottery. It seems a bit silly. Wouldn't everyone know not to fall for those? But apparently they do. And at one school I was working at, actually the staff room was plastered in anti-phishing posters, because apparently staff members had been replying to the phishing emails, even though they were highly suspicious. So here's an example of a sketchy situation. Loblaws altering the best before date on some food.
Mohammed Safari dreads going to work at this Loblaws in Montreal. He says he was forced to make old food look fresh. That's why he secretly recorded his supervisor admitting tampering with best before dates is industry standard.
Every store does the same thing. All the other stores do the same.
At his home, Safari demonstrates what he says is done at work. He takes cheesecakes weeks past their best before dates, adds new toppings, and sells as fresh.
I decorate it, and I'm selling expired stuff for $13.99.
Oh, look at that one. In a national online call-out, Marketplace hears from grocery workers at smaller stores and big chains, sharing stories of food tampering. Like Zahir did. He used to work in a Toronto area supermarket. He shows us how he was told to give old meat new life.
If it's like this, we would dabble in a little bit of blood, throw it into the meat mincer with some redder meats, and then all together it would make it look red. And then we'd put it back up on the shelf.
At the University of Guelph, a microbiologist simulated what grocery insiders told us they do. He discovered toxins and bacteria linked to serious illness.
It goes beyond ethics, doesn't it? It goes to safety and things like that.
The Retail Council of Canada says major retailers all have guidelines they follow. Employees are telling us that they're being told from the top down to fudge the best before dates.
Right, and so I don't accept that premise.
But this Loblaws employee says it's not a premise, it's a fact he raised with management. In a statement to CBC, Loblaws says it's investigating and plans to take action. Until things change, though, the old food Safari says he was ordered to dress up just goes one place. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
So you can see how it turns into a bit of a he said, she said type of situation where both sides have their own stories, and it's hard to conclusively prove it. Even with some of this video editing, the retail council was saying, oh no, there's guidelines, no one would ever do that, but then it seems as if that's not the case. So sometimes these investigations happen and the Competition Bureau investigates and nothing's found. Sometimes they will find fault, but the best thing to do is to protect yourself. So then there's the Office of Consumer Affairs, and they'll post information on its website about, say, product recalls, safety issues, if there's something about food, listeria outbreak in a food, or if there's, a current scam happening, you can follow their Twitter feed. You can see the recent alerts in a archive, and it also helps just inform people on becoming a better consumer. So just what's the difference between false and misleading advertising? False is an untrue statement about a product. Misleading advertising kind of hints at it, but it's not entirely clear. It gives people the wrong understanding. It just doesn't make a bold claim, but it just makes things seem as maybe that something's healthy when it really isn't. And so if you can prove that, you can, the Competition Bureau can look into it. But again, sometimes it's hard exactly to sort it all out. Illegal pricing would be something that's not allowed in Canada. But again, these are some behaviors that the federal government does not allow, but you have to be able to prove it. Price fixing. Two competitors agree to set a price to take advantage of the consumer. Predatory pricing, that would be like at a payday loan where they do a check cashing service, and they charge you $40 to cash a $200 check just because you have no other options, or a very, very high rate on payday loans because you don't have a lot of options. Taking advantage of people. Sometimes even philosophically, there's a lot of high Wi-Fi prices, and people need it in 2021 to connect to school and work. Are they being taken advantage of? Well, as you can see by maybe your own experience, it's very hard to prove these cases. Bait and switch. You advertise one price, and then when the consumer gets there, it turns out there's another price. Resale price maintenance. So you can only have the suggested retail price. The retailer can choose to sell it for whatever they want. The manufacturer can suggest a price, but they can't force it. And resale price maintenance is when they force the retailer, or sort of, maybe bully the retailer. Price discrimination is charging different prices to different people. So sometimes you might hear that a male reporter goes to the car shop with a issue and gets quoted a lower price, and then the female reporter goes and she's quoted a much higher rate because they assume she might not know the difference. Price discrimination, showing different people different prices, but it really, these things can be hard to prove. So it's, although it is against the law in Canada, the best recourse is to keep an eye out yourself. Here's an example of some price fixing.
Call it a meltdown at Canada's candy factories. 3 major chocolate makers have been charged with price fixing. They're accused of collusion in what is a multi-billion-dollar industry and now face criminal charges. Mike Armstrong is following this story for us. Mike?
Well, Donna, we might only be talking about chocolate bars, but they're very serious charges. There could be fines up to $10 million and even jail up to 5 years. They are some of the biggest names on the racks of local corner stores and gas stations across the country. Nestle Canada faces charges, makers of Smarties and Kit Kats. The second company is Mars Canada, makers of Mars bars and M&Ms. The third company is BBI2O, an Ontario-based national wholesale distributor.
Gas bars, independent grocers, restaurants, and institutions depend on BBI2O.
BBI2O's CEO is one of the individuals charged with conspiracy, as are 2 executives from Nestle, including a former president. The companies would have shared their prices to drive up the market.
The charge that's actually laid today, the time period is from 2002 to 2008.
Now, according to the Competition Bureau, it was someone on the inside of the cartel that blew the whistle way back in 2007.
There's somebody that came to the Bureau, knocked on the door.
That person has been granted immunity as the first to come forward. No one else will get off that lightly. A 4th company involved hasn't been granted immunity, but it's being promised leniency. Hershey Canada, the makers of O. Henry, haven't been charged with anything yet, but they're expected to plead guilty June 21st. The Bureau says they've cooperated with the investigation. Donna?
Mike, thanks.
Okay, so again, other types of consumer protection. Well, you don't need to know all the details, but for example, the Privacy Act, if they use information, they have to, keep it private and keep it confidential. The environmental protection, obviously not damaging the environment, food inspection, and the food needs to be healthy. Financial Consumer Agency of Canada is, for financial products like credit cards, like charging a very high rate that targets people without much of a choice would be something they would look into. And this just runs the gamut of everything that's supposed to help protect consumers. So then we also have the provincial government. So we pay provincial taxes, and here you can see the tax rate's a lot smaller in Ontario than it is for the federal government. These major items are healthcare and education, and but again, it's a marginal tax rate. It increases as the person's income goes up. And they offer consumer protection Ontario, which again about raising awareness about scams. They'll say, like, if you're thinking about doing a home renovation, here are the steps to follow so you don't so you get protected. You can file complaints. If you go to the website right now, you'll see a big box about filing complaints about COVID-19 price gouging. So you have to provide the location, the time, the price, details like that. One issue that's been a focus in Ontario is the payday loans that are taken out until the next paycheck. and just the interest can be so high, it leads to people taking out another loan to pay for the interest on the first loan, and a small loan ends up becoming a big expense.
Payday loans offer quick cash when you need it, but you may end up paying more than you expect. Make sure you're informed before taking out a loan. In Ontario, payday lenders can charge no more than $21 for every $100 that a customer borrows. Consumers have a 2-day cooling off period to cancel a loan with no reason and no penalty. Your loan agreement has to fully disclose the amount you're borrowing, the number of days your agreement is for, and the total cost of borrowing. You should also know that rollover loans are not allowed. This means you must fully pay off one loan before taking out another one from the same lender. Payday loans are a very expensive form of credit. If you have other options for credit, use them first. Remember, when you use a payday loan service, be a smart consumer and reduce your risk by always dealing with a licensed payday lender.
So there you can see some advice, some rules, things like that are what the province of Ontario will do. And municipal government also has a role. For example, it might have conspicuously noticed the dine safe signs that the restaurants have to be inspected 1 to 3 times annually. If there's a violation, you can call it in. For example, the kitchen or the restroom or something about the food, you can call that in. And also, if there's other issues, like there's a business that is like operating like on a patio that's not allowed, noise complaint, 311 is the number for some of these business permitting issues to call. So Dine Safe is its own separate program, and then 311 can deal with any other issues like hours of operation and so on. So, what do businesses need to know about the government? Well, from the federal government, you've got to pay your harmonized sales tax. So businesses collect HST. So that's 5% goes to the federal government, 8% goes to the province of Ontario. It used to be, there was some PST, some GST. They didn't necessarily always line up. It was a little bit confusing. So the idea is HST goes on everything, and so you collect it as a business owner from consumers. So you're going to get a business a number, and then as they pay the HST, you'll keep track of that, and you'll keep a HST payable account. In accounting, you will credit it because it's a liability that needs to be paid to the government every quarter or every year. So then, when you buy things as a business, you can get your HST back. So you keep track of how much HST you spent. You create an account called HST Recoverable that is a contra liability account. You debit it, and then every 3 months you subtract HST Recoverable from HST Payable and remit the difference to the government. And some small businesses can do it annually, but most do it on a quarterly basis, and it's remitted to the Canada Revenue Agency. Every 5 years, a business must register, and this costs $140. This gives them the business number in order to do all the payroll deductions, to pay their corporate income taxes, to import and export products, and to pay their HST. So Canada has a system for workplace safety. You might have seen at a summer job. It's called WHMIS, Workplace Hazardous Material Information System. And so there's training programs, how to handle the products safely, how to carry them safely. There has to be clear labels, and there has to be, what's inside, and also these material data safety sheets, which are, little brochures about the material and how it should be safely handled. And each year, workers do training. They have to follow safe work procedures and review the labels and the material safety data sheets before they handle any of the hazardous chemicals. And here are some of the symbols you might see at work. So, we don't want any of this flammable, corrosive, explosive, toxic, So you would read the data sheet and see if there's any precautions, like store in a well-ventilated area, or watch this temperature, or wear this safety equipment. And you just, if you don't haven't been properly trained, then don't touch the flammable products. So what is the provincial government? How do they impact businesses? Well, there's the Employment Standards Act, basic rights for workers, like what the minimum wage is. It's $4.25 in Ontario right now. The overtime, what days are public holidays, what's required for termination pay, sick leave, parental leave, vacation pay. This is all set out in the Employment Standards Act. What might you need to know? Well, for students, your minimum wage at the moment is $13.40. Every 5 hours after working consecutively, you're entitled to a 30-minute unpaid break. Overtime is time and a half after working 44 hours weekly. And if you are to get a paid holiday, you must work the shifts before and after. So if Canada Day falls on a Tuesday, you need to work Monday and Wednesday to be credited with your Canada Day holiday pay. But there's a whole lot of it. Read the Employment Standards Act so that you know all the details to protect yourself. So, one of the issues, kind of frustrating, right, is that there's these people who are essential workers who are dealing with customers, keeping things open, and Doug Ford has rolled back their minimum wage increase. So they're living in an expensive city like Toronto, working tons of hours, maybe working multiple jobs, and their minimum wage was rolled back. And then also some have felt that if you had there were two sick days that everyone had, paid sick days where they could, if they were not feeling well, they could not come in so they wouldn't affect anyone else. And those were also rolled back. And that might have, contributed a bit to the spread of people going in with COVID symptoms because they were afraid of losing their paycheck. The Employment Standards Act is supposed to protect people so nobody feels taken advantage of by their employer. Just understand with health and safety. Workers have 3 key rights. They need to know what the hazards are in the workplace, what could possibly be dangerous. When there's a discussion, they have the right to raise issues. Hey, this machine seems to be dangerous. Can we have it inspected? It is hot. Can we get more ventilation? Things like that. And if you believe that work is unsafe, you can refuse unsafe work. But there's responsibilities. So, workers and the management are both responsible for workplace safety. So you have to report any hazards that you see. You can't leave it to someone else. You need to follow the training that you were given and work safely. Wear the protective equipment and participate in safety programs. So if there's a training session, you need to attend that. Refusing unsafe work is controversial. So if you honestly believe that it's unsafe, here's the procedure. Contact your supervisor and the workplace safety rep, and you stay, in a safe place, where you're not going to be injured. For example, if it was a warehouse in a heat wave, leave the warehouse while because that would be, don't stay where it's too hot. So make sure you yourself are safe. The supervisor and the safety rep will investigate and come to a determination of whether or not it's safe or unsafe. If there's still disagreement after the initial investigation, the Ministry of Labor is called and they will do an investigation. Now, again, you want to, the best workplace safety advice is attend the training, be aware, and be active. Don't rely on the Ministry of Labor. Protect yourself first. So businesses in Ontario need to register their name, and Service Ontario is where you go if you need anything from the provincial government. So if you want to register your own business, it's $60 electronically, and you can make a partnership or sole proprietorship, or you can make a corporation. It gives you a business identification number, and then you can operate. in Ontario. So the only exception is if you're using your own full name, then you don't need a business registration name. You just need a business number from Canada. What does the municipal government do to businesses? Well, licensing and permits, to register your business. Zoning, is this business allowed in this part of the city? The signage, the right, size of the sign, making sure that it's not, too bright, not disturbing people. You're going to build a big sign, you can need a permit. You're going to build, renovate, demolish, build, you need a building permit. Don't renovate your business later on, because the municipal licensing and standards could come back and force you to make alterations. Musical performances, patios, things like that are require permits. You need permits to serve alcohol on the premises. So these are all things. You can go to the City of Toronto website. BizPal is a website in Canada. You select where you're operating, what your type of business is, and it tells you all the appropriate permits for that area, because it might vary from city to city. And then obviously we've noticed in the last year Toronto Public Health, so its job is to oversee the health of the 3 million residents in Toronto. On a normal day, it would talk about smoking or chemicals, just regular issues. So if you noticed a restaurant where there was, people were smoking indoors, you could call 311 for bylaw enforcement. But in 2020, 2001, it's been enforcing the COVID-19 safety protocols, doing some contact tracing. If there's for example, if someone informed the school that they tested positive, Toronto Public Health would be contacted to try and sort out the contact tracing. So if a business had an employee who tested positive for COVID-19, then they would report that to Toronto Public Health. Test your knowledge. It's a little bit of a web scavenger hunt. So you can go through these slides, but then there might be a couple of questions about the Employment Standards Act. And obviously I want you to know the Employment Standards Act, so I'm making you read a little bit. I mean, most of the stuff is in the slides, but there's a couple of extra questions. There's 2 different quizzes here. Employment standards, because you might start to get a part-time or summer job, and workplace safety, because that applies to everyone. So give those a shot, and take your time, don't rush.